Understanding Tijeras Through Querencia by Mary Lopez. Located 15 miles east of Albuquerque, the East Mountains is locally known as the area which comprises of Tijeras, Cedar Crest, San Antonito, and Sandia Park. People who live in these small mountain communities retain a deep connection to the land. They know that gardening in clay-heavy soil and cool climate conditions can be difficult, and they notice when rain is scarce because the threat of wildfire constantly looms. To understand love of place, known in Spanish as Querencia, one has to know the ground, the rocks, the trees, the flora, and the fauna. As a child playing outside, I became familiar with the red clay soil, yucca plants, and juniper trees. This strengthened my understanding of Querencia in terms of the physical landscape. In contrast, I have only recently begun to understand Querencia in terms of my ancestors. Many residents of the East Mountains have lived here for generations, and yet they do not know the stories of how the land was shaped by those who walked it before them. Understanding this history is the next step we must take in understanding Querencia. Native American people have resided in the Tijeras Canyon for over 900 years. Hunters and gatherers lived in pit houses like this one, which was built in the area in 700 AD. When native people started leaving the Colorado Plateau and Mesa Verde in the 1200s, they came to Tijeras because they were attracted to its proximity to both the Manzano and Sandia Mountains, year-round water resources, variety of plants and animals, as well as wood for fuel and shelter. The Tijeras Pueblo was built around 1313 and deserted by 1425. The pueblo was built on a mound of dirt next to a small river. It was arranged in a U shape and consisted of 200 rooms. Walls of their homes were built in the paddled adobe style, with successive layers of thick mud. The ceremonial kiva was constructed in the center of the pueblo in this area. It is difficult to imagine that a large adobe structure once stood here. The Tijeras people gathered, hunted, and farmed for survival. They grew corn, beans, and squash. They were expert foragers, utilizing yucca to weave baskets, shoes, and mats. They ate the fruit and pads of cactus. Seeds from native grasses were ground to make flour. Piñons from pine trees were roasted to eat and often used for trade. The sticky tree resin from piño trees were used for chewing gum and to waterproof baskets. The Tijeras Pueblo people also mined limestone to make tools, turquoise for trade and ceremonial objects, quartz for arrowheads and knives, and clay to make pottery. Remnants of their work can still be found in the area today. The reason the Pueblo people left the site in 1425 is largely unknown. It is believed to have been related to drought or soil issues. Tijeras Canyon had long been used as a travel corridor for both native and Spanish people. Apaches traveled through the canyon and used the area as a campground before riding west to raid communities along the Rio Grande. After an attempt at Spanish settlement proved unsuccessful in 1770 due to Comanche raids, it wasn't until 1819 that two permanent villages were built around enclosed plazas in the Tijeras area. The villages became known as San Miguel de Loreto, located near the old San Miguel in present-day Cornwall, and San Antonio de Padua, located a mile north of the present-day intersection of North 14 and I-40. Between 1819 and 1848, these two villages were thriving agricultural communities. A chapel was built overlooking the San Antonio Plaza, which later burned down and was rebuilt in the 1950s. Water from mountain springs was supplied to homes in San Antonio through acequias that can still be found today. Acequias have been described as open-air water canals common throughout the arid world. Acequias conserve water by storing it for later use. Irrigating the land to capture water was necessary for life to flourish in arid environments. Spanish settlers survived off of beans, corn, garden vegetables, wine, and wheat. They also commonly raised sheep, goats, and cattle, as well as hunting for meat and hides. This history can serve as a tool to deepen our understanding and love for the East Mountain area through time and place. Many people living today do not know the history of their land and how it was shaped by those before us. The Tijeras area has been occupied by Native Americans for centuries, and later by the Spanish who settled after them. These people relied on the land. They used it to forage, to hunt, and to grow crops. They built acequia systems to transport water to communities, and built kivas and churches to establish their faith in the area. The remnants of their work can be seen today in the names of roads and churches, although their effort remains largely unknown in the present day. By opening our eyes to the work of our ancestors, we can learn more about ourselves, as the land that currently sustains us has sustained them for hundreds of years.